evening, everyone, and good evening, and welcome to our third installment of History Speaks 2013. We have had some very wonderful speakers thus far this year, and we look forward to a wonderful program tonight. As I look out here, I am seeing into the crowd, I see quite a few of you that are vying for perfect History Speaks attendance, which is very commendable. What the reward is for this perfect attendance, I'm not quite sure, but oh yes, I do know. It's another great program. With that in mind, here is Paul Burton.
You'll have to bear with me a bit. I have a cold. Can you hear me? Okay, a little hoarse, but we'll carry on. Our speaker this evening is Scholz, a prominent local educator and co-founder of an interactive farm. It's a farm museum near Sturgeon Bay. It's called The Farm. Anyone ever been to the farm? It's a great place. I went there. I was writing a chapter in a book and visited the farm and wrote a chapter about the farm, and I was really blown away by it. They do a really good job. And the subject this evening is farming in Door County. All farmers, raise your hands, please. 2 farmers. Oh, that's got 2. Okay. There's no truth to the rumor that our major crop up here is glacier tumbled rocks. They did grow things up here. It was a tough go, but they managed, particularly in southern Door. Scholz has lived here for 62 years. But he grew up on a farm in Ozaukee County. So he's a farm boy who went away and got educated. And when I think of people who played key roles in preserving the natural fabric of Door County, Carl is high on my list. After serving his country in World War II, he completed his college degree and taught vocational agriculture at Sebastopol School. Later, he became superintendent of the school district and worked hard to make Sebastopol one of the best rural schools in the state of Wisconsin, and he did achieve that. I know Carl is a naturalist and historian, and he was president of the Ridges, which I admire, for 15 years. He was one of the ones who really got the Ridges off the ground as a nationally recognized nature preserve. I know Carl as a naturalist and a historian, and I admire his many positive contributions to helping preserve the quality of life, of all life, not just plants and animals, but people as well. People, after all, are animals. Everyone recognizes that people are animals. Anyone who doesn't accept the fact that people are animals, raise your hand. Thank you. One guy back there, he's a video person, so that figures. I'm not sure whether Carl is a tree hugger, but if he is, I want to be one too. This is Carl Scholz, and we welcome him to History Speaks.
Thank you, Paul. Those are the finest things no one has ever said about me. So thank you very much. I certainly appreciate it. I hope I resemble those. Thank you. I have all kinds of thank yous to present. One, certainly Paul for inviting me, and for Tia for getting everything in order here, and my wife, who is a photographer for the show, and Laddie Chapman, who is the director of the Sebastopol video system and is a audio-visual technologist. And I'd like to thank some of the, I see we even have some master gardeners here, and one of them asked how in the world this related to farming. will tell you in a few minutes. And I have at least one of my former students here, David Long and his wife. David was one of my ag students, and he was a wheat specialist and traveled the country for the USDA. And Bob Davis was kind enough to call me this morning and ask if he could help. I didn't think of anything at the moment, but later I told him, I said, yes, he could prevent me from saying much more than I know. And he said, no, he'll prevent me from things I should not say. So that's probably better. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I certainly appreciate it. And anybody know what period this was in our world? The Silurian period. Now, how would that relate to farming? It's extremely important. Without the Silurian period, which was the age of corals and many other creatures, we would not have limestone. The most important mineral in the world, limestone, and extremely important to Door County. I brought a few of the items that were part of the Silurian period, the brachiopod, and because of the age of the corals, a couple corals. But seeing those reminds me, I was going to ask if Al Schneider was here. He's not here? Well, that's too bad. And how many of you know Al, the geologist? Well, all I know about geology I learned from Al in 10-hour sessions. Oops, I almost forgot. Here. The next period is just as important in our natural history of the world, the Ice Age. Without the Ice Age, we wouldn't have the Great Lakes, for one thing. We wouldn't have all of those fine glacial features. We wouldn't have this piece of drift copper. And somebody was concerned about the period, and I said that the Silurian period was 225 million years ago. I could have started with this 5 billion years ago. And we got something that's almost that old, and I thought of that when I mentioned Al Schneider. He wrote something about the official state rock. Anybody know what the official state rock is? Ruby red granite. And I should mention, too, going back to the other slide, what is the official state fossil? Who knows? Pardon? No, well, that's a good guess, but it isn't right. Anybody know? If somebody knows, you get a brachiopod. No one knows? Oh, gosh. Well, I'll have to keep it. The trilobite tri is for three, lobe is for body, and ite is for family. It's a three-lobe body, the trilobite. There's a museum in Kenosha that has a wonderful display of trilobites. Then without the Ice Age, we wouldn't have all those wonderful erratic rocks, including the granites and many others. Oops, here it is. You're ahead of it. Ruth thinks I'm not moving. I better. I forgot to check my watch. Okay. Thank you. Anyway, lime kiln. This is why it's important. The Silurian period was especially important to farming. There were dozens of lime kilns in Door County and in every farming area. The lime was so-called burned. Then it was slacked to get the setting agent for mortar and concrete, for whitewashing barns, even homes. They added salt to the mixture and used that as paint. But this is what they call a mixed kiln. The kindling was put at the bottom, was put a layer of wood on it and some rocks, and filled up the entire kiln, and the lime was so-called burned. But without that, we would have had a difficult time, especially in Door County, because they needed the lime for the log buildings, and also, of course, for all the other uses that were necessary for the use of calcium hydroxide. This was a home of the first pioneer in Sevastopol, George Bassford. 6 people lived in that home starting in 1856. And George came to this country from the UK because the shipping companies advertised that sugar grew on trees in America. So he came to Door County and had a maple syrup operation. This happened to be one of his buckets from the 1860s. It was found under a piece of sheet metal near his sugar shack in the woods behind their building. This is the kind of spile that they used. And he didn't use this, but anybody know what this is in relation to maple syrup? An Indian macaque. And the Native Americans used these by the hundreds. And George was certainly an entrepreneur. This was the halfway house that he built after he left the log cabin. It was at the intersection of what is now P and 42. But people traveling from the north to the south or south to north stopped here, left their cattle and horses in a barn that you'll see in a minute. And he charged for the food and feed, but not the housing of the cattle. The cattle and horses were housed in that building. This is a shot of another real pioneer, Joseph Zettel. And this is what was said about Joseph Zettel in the commemorative biographical record of the counties of Brown, Kewaunee, and Dora, Wisconsin, published in 1895. It pays tribute to Joseph Zettel. Among the men of mark in the noble army of pioneers of this section of the state, there is no name more deserving of being perpetuated in the pages of this biographical record than that of Joseph Zettel. And this was his farm in It's at near the intersection of 57 and 42. It's the first farm on Highway 57. On the left side as you're going north. And that's the Settle family. And that building, as you'll see that in a minute, do you know what that was? A fruit cellar. And that's where he stored his apples. In fact, at the World's Fair of 1893, he had exhibited the finest selection of 20 varieties of apples in the world. So he really was a true pioneer farmer and orchardman. There's no person who has contributed more to agriculture than any other person, or who contributed. Yes, it was Luther Burbank. The variety of zucchini type summer squash, gold rush is a good example. The miracle plant breeders have produced using the principles and procedures developed by Luther Burbank. He was truly a partner with nature in working to produce superior plant varieties. He produced 1,200 different plant varieties. And it's amazing that there were 4 contemporaries who were friends. Edison, Ford, Goodyear, and Luther Burbank were all friends. Burbank's farm was in Sevastopol, California. That's true. That's where he did all his work, and he always did all his work in a coat and tie. Who knows what? Anybody here know Greek?
No what?
Greek, the Greek language. No? Well, that's too bad. Anyway, the Sevastopol on the Black Sea was founded by the Greeks many years ago. And Sevastopol is Greek for a place of glory. And I suspect that that's one reason that Luther Burbank started that farm at Sevastopol, because it was a place of glory. There's the zucchini, and not a good example, because for some reason it got a blight. David, what kind of blight is that? Would you know?
Not necessarily right now. I didn't work with
You don't know. It's not related to wheat, but anyway, it sort of collapsed. All right. Here's a real good example of a diversified pioneer farmer, the Hansel farm, that was founded in 1902. It was a dairy farm, and this is what that farm looks like today. And it's really diversified. It's probably one of the most diversified farms in Wisconsin, a beautiful farm. They have dairy cattle, hogs, cherry orchard, a sawmill. They produce a lot of maple syrup and field crops. So that's a good example of the well-diversified, beautiful farm. And that happens to be in the town of Egg Harbor. It's at the intersection of Country View and Town Line Road. How many of you have seen this farm? Excuse me, I'll get a drink of water. in the days that a farm like this operated, if they had neighborhood bulls, and that would be moved from farm to farm. This is what they used, bull blinders. And of course they'd put a ring in the nose of the bull and use a staff, and then put blinders on the bull, so a bull wouldn't be attracted to a pretty heifer. How am I doing time-wise, Ruth? You're the timekeeper.
Pretty good.
Pretty good, okay. Well,
I'll start moving faster.
one of the challenges for pioneers was clearing land, especially stumps. And this is a stump puller that was used for one of the big stumps. And that was a real challenge to use. It would be tipped over, and there were eyes, and then would be moved from one side to another and then set up. So, a power sweep that was used. I think we have a next slide, I think, shows how that was used.
You've got a picture there.
I have a picture. I thought I had one on there. We don't have one on the, well, anyway, it was, well, we won't use it. I thought we had, okay, that's.
What they did it, you used it for.
Pardon?
What's it used for?
Oh, it was used for, that was a power takeoff. The cattle, horses were attached to those arms, and then that would be either attached to a threshing machine or something else that needed power. In fact, at the Sevastopol antique powered days near Valmy, they have a fellow who brings a small power sweep with some donkeys or horses to power it. But that's how they, especially the threshing machines were used the power sweep. The Peninsula Experiment Station was founded in 1922, and Bob, you asked me when they planted the first cherry trees, and I told you 1922, I was wrong. It was 1896 when they planted the first cherry trees in Door County. The Peninsula Experiment Station is also the home for the USDA genetic potato germ bank. It's the largest potato germ bank in the world. And what vegetable has the potential of eliminating hunger in the world? Anybody know? Potato. I have a collection of potatoes here. I don't think you see them. You might like to take a look. Every color imaginable. I think it would take too long. But that's a good example of the kind of genetics that they use in producing the potato varieties. This is the plaque in front of the experiment station. It tells about the Joseph Zettel again, and the experiment station. A cherry tree. this is amazing. This is a Montmorency. That was the variety that was planted in 1896. And it's still planted today. Now, in the case of most fruit and vegetable, there have been varieties that have been developed over the years, usually improved varieties. However, the Montmorency cherry is still the same cherry that we used to call them sour cherries. Now the fruit growers don't like that term. It's tart, tart cherry. But and of course, they will send almost have a record cherry crop this year. Last year it was almost a total failure. But Montmorency cherry, and there are some other varieties that have been developed, and some foreign varieties. Bellin is one that Bellin variety. Some have been planting those. They are a little later, but apparently they haven't been as popular as the Montmorency. Silos. This is a silo that was in the ash barn in the town of Sevastopol. It was built in the barn, and that was quite common. And today, that would have enough silage for one day for a big herd of cattle. This is what the silos look like today. The A.O. Smith and the other windmill. Many years ago, people ridiculed the windmill. They said that it was old-fashioned, and many of the farms today have either the windmill or at least the standard for the windmill. But of course, windmills today have again become popular as power generators.
These are usually most for water?
Pardon?
Used for water?
Yes, thank you. Windmills, their primary use was for pumping water. And no, these were never used to generate power, but they were just strictly used for, and today many of them are used in the West particularly, where they don't have power. The Model T Ford. The Ford dealers don't like to have me say that was the last good Ford built. But that was extremely important to agriculture. It had they used it for belt power. They'd jack them up and use them for belt power, and of course use them for transportation and for as a farm truck. This happened to be a 1923 Model T. They were built. The first were built in 1908 through 1926, and in 27 there wasn't a model, but a few were built in 1927. That's a land wheel. Anybody know what a land wheel is and how it was used? That's the
Your mic has gone off. Yeah, the mic doesn't work.
Mic doesn't work?
Or you don't talk loud enough.
Oh, okay.
No, they're working.
Oh, okay. I'll talk a little louder. This is a land wheel. This is 1 rod in circumference and was used by surveyors. Had a counter on it. Can you imagine doing a surveying with that, pushing that? And the surveyors did a remarkable job in surveying. And another piece of equipment that they used was a surveyor's chain. Anybody ever see a surveyor's chain? They use those. And it's remarkable the work that they could do. Occasionally you find where there have been errors, where they have offset and highways. There's at the intersection of Matthew Road and the Town Line Road, there's an offset. But that's when they made errors and they had to correct the errors. Those were range lines, so they had to move them 100 yards or whatever it might be because of the error. Anybody know what that is? That's a wind generator. I always thought it was W-I-N-D, it's W-I-N. Sorry. That was used to generate electric power on the farm, but it was used primarily to charge batteries. It was a 6-volt wind generator, but they're quite popular on farms of yesteryear. If they raised chickens like in this way, how much would a dozen eggs cost? But this is a good example of a cluck hut. And at the farm, that's extremely popular. Children just enjoy watching the chicks. It's a cluck. There's a sugar shack at the farm. This is
Carol, when you turn this thing, we can't hear you.
okay. Thank you.
What do they do in the sugar shack?
This is a replica of the hundreds of sugar shacks that once existed in Wisconsin. It has an arch, a 2-firebox arch. And this was the improved model of a Ford tractor as a Ford car. It was Ford developed the Fordson tractor. This is a Ford tractor. Fordson. Anybody ever drive a Fordson? Ruth, you did? Some call them growlers because they had a transmission that really made a lot of noise.
When did they start using them?
The Fordsons?
When did they start using them?
Yes, I was just trying to think. Probably about 1930 is when they first. It was sometime in about in the 1930s is when they had the first Fordson tractors.
That would have been in the teens, I think.
There's another way in which they powered their threshing machines with a horse treadle. Can you imagine operating a threshing machine in that way?
They walked on a treadmill. Did they walk on a treadmill?
That's a treadmill, yes. Thank you. One thing I wanted to point out was this plant. Anybody know what it is? It's extremely important. Alfalfa. And without alfalfa, I think that milk would probably be $20 a quart, because that's a source of protein. And that's a plant of the Middle East, from Arabia. And the alfalfa is an Arabic for father of all food. And that's truly what it is. I'm certain that our farms today, especially the dairy farms, without alfalfa, would be in economic stress. In fact, some are this year. We begin some, about 1 million acres of alfalfa in Wisconsin didn't survive the winter. Are there any questions?
Yeah, how many dairy farms are left in northern Door, do you know?
Yeah, I know how many farms there are left. There are 854. And I suppose about a half of those, I asked them, they didn't have that information immediately at hand at the exchange. But I would think that probably about 300 or 400 are still in existence in Door County. But there are 854 farms. What a definition of a farm is if it is a operation that produces more than $100, $1,000. I'm sorry, $1,000 worth of products. Yes, sir.
Driving around the county in the last couple of days, I've noticed a lot of the cherry orchards seem to be defoliating. Is that some kind of a treatment that they use to make the fruit more accessible, or what's going on there?
You mean the yellow leaf?
Yes.
Yes, that's a common fungal disease, and it's it can be fatal to the tree if it is affected and consecutive. Even this year, with part of the tree leaves being yellowed and dying, and it's especially true in a year like this when we got a lot of small showers. They wet the tree. Maybe David, maybe you know more about the yellow leaf.
Is it a fungus? Yeah, I was wondering if it might be a virus. I haven't had a chance to look at the leaves, but usually yellow leaf needs a virus disease.
Yeah. Oh, it's a virus.
I think it's a virus.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's a virus. It is not a fungus. It's a.
They're just producing so many cherries. I think they're under some extra stress there because all the cherries being produced.
Yeah.
I think it's taking some of the nutrition away from the leaves.
So sort of a follow-up to that, is there a lot of need for fungicides, insecticides, and so on the cherry crop in this area, or is it pretty much able to grow without any treatments?
The amount of cherries? Well, they predict the crop this year to be at a little over 9 million pounds, but they said that they always try to keep the estimate down because that affects the price. If they have the price too high or the estimate too high, the price is affected. Last year there was a little over a million.
They use a lot of it.
Pardon?
He asked if they used fungicides.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or a lot of pesticides.
What chemicals?
Oh, pesticides, yes, they definitely. Without some type of fungicide, the virus would affect the crop. In fact, it will eventually kill the tree.
I think they spray about 4 or 5 times a year.
Yeah.
Again, I've been away from.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. They used to spray that much, and I'm sure they still spray 4 or 5 times a year. So they use a fair amount of fungicides.
Yeah.
Yes, you should wash them.
You should watch your cherries. Yes, please watch your cherries.
No, it's unfortunate that we have to use biocides of one kind, but there is no alternative. And the cherry yellow leaf would be an example. Very definitely. Yes, sir.
What did the farmers put in their silage?
Silage. Yeah. Yes, if most of it is silage. It's either corn or grass silage, or sometimes they put in high moisture corn to the kernel of the corn, or put into the silage. But it's fermented to a degree, consumes the oxygen, and that and then it also turns a little on the acid side, and that preserves it. But a lot of the silos now are sausages. They're horizontal silos. One of the most popular silos over the years was the A.O. Smith silo. And that was produced because A.O. Smith developed a process of adhering glass to steel. And that is what they lined those silos with, the A.O. Smith. And those were all self-unloaders. They had a self-unloading mechanism in them.
Carl,
Yes,
why didn't you go into farming?
it's a good question. Well, I guess the farm wasn't large enough, and I was very interested in farming, of course, so I became a vocational ag teacher. Instead of farming myself, I tried to tell others how to farm. And that's very interesting. I was, in my time, was a Smith-Hughes-Act. And as a vo ag teacher, I had adult and young farmer classes. Anyway, here was a 23-year-old fellow trying to tell these experienced farmers how to farm, but I did survive. Yeah. Nancy.
Is it true that the Honeycrisp was developed up here? The Honeycrisp apple?
Yeah.
No, wasn't that Minnesota?
No, I don't. Let's see, Honeycrisp. It might have been in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was the new one.
Yeah. So was a new one, yes. And then that's interesting. What is the Japanese apple? Fuji. The Fuji apple was developed at the Morioka College of Agriculture and Forestry, and I was there. I didn't help develop the Fuji apple, but I was there in service and was assigned to the, I was the military representative in the college's library. And then some years ago, Jim Wood from Wind Orchard was going to Morioka, to the Morioka College of Agriculture and Forestry because of their apple breeding program. And he traveled there to northern Honshu, Japan. Yes, ma'am.
If a young person wants to go into farming today, how has it changed?
Almost virtually impossible, unless they inherit it, made it part of a family farm. Almost impossible. The investment is so great, and not only in machinery but the land. I noticed that agricultural land now is as much as $8,000 an acre. Yes, sir.
Are there crops that are being grown here or can be grown here now which could not be 50, 100 years ago? And also things that were planted then which are no longer suited to this sort of new climate, or is there a new climate?
See, I'm trying to think of what they grow today. Most of the, excuse me, I'll get a drink of water. I noticed that there's some are trying to grow hops for the brewing industry, but other than that, I have planted some rape occasionally, which is, and that hasn't been very successful.
They planted peas a long time ago, and now they're still.
Oh, yes, some peas, and I brought some peas along. During the 1800s, they raised peas. In fact, they had a pea cannery in Sturgeon Bay, but they developed some, I don't know if it was the aphids or was it a disease, David, would you know? But anyway, maybe it was a combination of things, but then the pea growing left the county, and they grew wheat.
They're still growing some peas in the county, though.
And now, right now, they're growing. I brought a whole bag of canning. Or now it used to be canning peas. Now they're freezing peas, and they're late varieties. I brought those as a treat, a good nutritional treat. Or some are growing. That's right. There are some. I'm trying to think what other things.
Well, George Bassford raised wheat. Remember, you saw that in the Advocate in the 1850s. George Bassford raised wheat.
Wheat, yes. Then I forgot. I mentioned that this was a statement. Excuse me. From George Bassford, very interesting. This was 150 years ago, August 9th, 1962. George Bassford, Sevastopol, who in less than 5 years has carved out of the woods a model farm in Door County. He says that he will match his crop of winter wheat against the entire state. But this was 1862, I'm sorry. But this was in the Advocate on August 11, 2012. That's George Bassford. And so he really was an entrepreneur. He had everything going.
One more question.
There's more wheat growing in the county right now probably than I've ever seen before. And this is because a lot of the farmers are getting out of the dairy farming, and they have to use their land for something. So one of the things they're using more is more wheat being grown. And it seems more things like soybeans, which you probably didn't see 40, 50 years ago when there was more farms around. So it's sort of we're getting more plants. We're saying more of the plants like that are being grown in the county rather than the dairy farming.
Is it related to longer growing seasons?
That could be a possibility, especially when it comes to soybeans. You've got a good point there, very good point. Soybeans that need a long growing season.
I remember when a couple of years they grew a lot of sunflowers for sunflower seed oil.
Yeah, the reason they don't raise sunflowers anymore is they, 1 year it's fine, but the second year they develop some type of it's a fungus. And we have a climate that is very conducive to that type of fungus, so that's why they cannot raise them in consecutive or even for 3 years. But there are some still raised at seed company, bird seed company in Algoma, contract with farmers to raise sunflowers, but they have to move them around. And that's true of the peas, too, the so-called freezing peas. There has to be a 5-year rotation. You may not plant peas in consecutive years. There has to be 5 years because of a root rot. And that's why the pea growers are growing. It moves around the county and around the state to a degree. However, Door County is ideal for raising so-called freezing peas.
Carl, thank you very much for...
You're very welcome.
So if you want to come up and talk with Carl more, you have the opportunity.
And I just wanted to say, Carl was kind enough to give the Ephraim Historical Foundation a gift, even though he was nice enough to come and talk to us. It is a Door County gavel, a versatile and indispensable aid in conducting meetings and orderly discussions. A gavel made of the Lady of the Woods, which is white birch on the top there, and then red dogwood on the bottom. It's an adaptation of the Native American tradition in which only one person holding the talking feather may speak. A gavel, however, is more effective as a silencer. So thank you very much, Carl.